Hello, I am Li Hao. Today I'm be talking about how you can prepare for a Svelte front-end interview. If you are looking for a front-end role, I hope this video will be very helpful for you. In this video, I'll share with you 3 tips on how you can prepare for a front-end interview. And at the end of this video, I will walk you through a demo of how I would go through for a front-end UI interview in Svelte. So who am I to share all these interview tips with you? Well, myself, I've been a front-end engineer for the past 8 years. I've did my fair share of interviews, and these tips comes from my experience from preparing for the interviews. And of course, I am currently a team lead within my company in Shopee. So I've been on the other side of the table where I am interviewing for other people's, and this comes from also things that I have been looking out for as an interviewer. So hopefully these tips will be helpful for you for preparing for your interview. So are you ready for preparing for your interview? Here are the 3 tips. Here we go. So before we start, of course, maybe you're asking me how or where you can find the list of jobs for Svelte. Well, I would recommend to you sveltejobs.com. Svelte Jobs is the #1 job board for Svelte developers, where you can find a list of jobs that hire for a Svelte developer, whether it's remote or in person, everywhere in the world. So if you're looking for a front-end developer role that uses Svelte, please do visit sveltejobs.com. The first tip I have for you is to be familiar with the process. You need to know what you will be up for so that you can be prepared for it. If you have zero clue about what you are getting into, I would recommend you to start with the front-end guidebook from the Great Front-End. It's a good starting point to know all you need to know about preparing for a front-end interview. Starting from how to write a good resume, knowing different types of interview questions and how to prepare for each of them, and how to set up a study plan to prepare and practice for an interview. If you're clueless about what are the different types of interview questions, that shows how unprepared you are, right? So there are different types of interview questions, for example, which includes algorithm coding, system design, JavaScript questions, or UI questions, which involves building a component with HTML and CSS, and sometimes interactions, UX with JavaScript, behavioral questions. So for each of these different types of questions, you need to know what are the interviewers are looking for and how you can prepare for them. Of course, this list of questions are very generic. It applies to all front-end roles for any companies out there. But once you get an interview offer from a company, one tip from me is that you should go and ask the recruiter to know more about the interview process from that company. For example, how many rounds and what kind of questions they are asking at each round of the interview so that you can be prepared for it. The last thing the recruiter would want to have is to find a suitable candidate that is very good but come unprepared and then flopped the interview, right? So the recruiter is there to help you to make sure that you can ace through the interview. So be sure to ask the recruiter. They are more than willing to help you. And of course, you can do your own research on the internet as well. If you're interviewing for a big companies like the FANG companies, there's a lot of resources out there, be it like Glassdoor or Reddit, that shares about what kind of interview questions, what kind of rounds, and what resources that will be helpful for you to be prepared for your interview. Know the interview processes that will be going through, and so that you will be prepared for the interview. I've seen interviewees coming to an interview unprepared, and I think that at the very least, to respect time for both the interviewers and yourself is to be prepared and show that you are keen for this role and you are ready to show them what you have. So my second tip is practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. So if you know that you are going for interview rounds about front ends, about UI, components, coding, in our case about Svelte, they could either ask you questions about Svelte to know how much you know about Svelte, or they would ask you to code a Svelte component on the spot to see how well you know about Svelte. So questions about Svelte could be, they will test you, maybe ask you about how much do you know about Svelte actions, or Svelte runes, or Svelte stores. Questions like this, you may think that you know really well about Svelte because you have been writing Svelte components, Svelte codes, but sometimes you may be surprised that if they ask you to explain what is Svelte actions in 1 or 2 sentences, you might get stuck because you have never thought about explaining that to someone else. I would suggest you to practice about it, to think about in your head about how you will be explaining concepts like Svelte actions, Svelte stores, maybe to like a 5-year-olds. Go through your head, practice a bit to formalize your ideas, to think about how to explain that concept to someone that does not know about Svelte. Of course, your interview knows about Svelte, or else why would they ask you? But I think if you can demonstrate that you can explain concepts like Svelte actions or Svelte store to someone who have no idea about Svelte, well, such that they can understand, I think this can set you apart from an average developers out there. But of course, they will still want to see you coding. Ultimately, you're being hired to write Svelte applications. They wouldn't want to hire someone with all talks and no action. So they will have some hands-on coding questions that's very similar to your day-to-day work. And that's where I think you should also practice writing components, Svelte components, while thinking out loud so that you can show your thought processes to the interviewer on live. I will be doing a demo later on at the end of this video. I have the chapters in the YouTube where you can jump straight to that if you want to watch that. I'll be showing you how I'll be walking through a UI coding interview questions and things that I will look out for, and I will point out tips and tricks throughout that demo. So my third tips for you for preparing for an interview is to have a study plan. Right? Once you know the process of the interview, and once you know that you have to practice for it, then you have to be realistic of how much time you need to practice. Maybe you have set up a date when you will be interviewing for the company. Then you have to work backwards and set up some study plans, know the list of topics that you need to prepare of, allocate time for each of the topics well, and then allocate time to prepare for them, and then stick to the plan. I don't think you can just prepare within a day, especially if you have another commitment. Set up a plan that it's realistic, that you can do, that you can stick for every day towards the interview day. That's all my 3 tips that I have for you. And we'll be going through a demo right now. Let's go. To demonstrate a UI coding interview for you, I'm at this great front-end website, which I just mentioned that they have this amazing front-end interview guides, which is completely free. I will leave the link in the description. And they also provide lists of practice questions on the website where you can practice with. So navigate to the practice questions. They have coding, they have system design questions, and they also have quiz, which is completely free. Right? You can prepare end-to-end front-end interviews, or you can practice questions with specific frameworks or languages. And in there they have Svelte. Right, so which is great for us. Let's try work on some Svelte questions over here. I'm going to choose maybe a digital clock, like something like a medium level. So here you can see a list of questions with different difficulty level. I've logged in with my account, so I have full access to all the questions, including the solutions. But if you are coming as a guest, you can get to try on a few questions, and you can decide whether that's worth your money to practice on all the questions there is. Right, so today we will try on the digital clock, which is also free, so that you can actually try together with me if you want to. If you see here on the question itself, you can try to work on these questions on various frameworks like React, Vanilla.js, or Angular, or Svelte. And you can actually click on the solution to look at the solution for Svelte. And if you have not noticed, I am the one writing the solution in this great front end over here. So this is my solution. You can read through my code. And today we will be walking through the solution step by step, showing you how I will be walking them through a real life interview scenarios. I might not get the exact same answer over here because I didn't memorize the answer that we have. But if you are stuck with other questions in the grid front end, you can actually click to look at the solutions, and I write some of the Svelte answers for them, so you can be sure that it's from me, and I think they are amazing. Okay, so we are gonna go back on this one, go back to the descriptions, go back to the workspace where we are left with. So here is the question, right? So the question asks us to write a widget that looks like this on the image, that renders the current time in the hour, minute, second formats using a 7-segment digital display. You feel free to use a 12-hour or 24-hour display. And here's an example of the clock, right? You can choose different colors or style it differently, but however, it should still function as a clock, allowing the user to read the time. So every time when you get in interview questions, don't rush into writing the code. It's the same where when you are at work as a software engineer, don't rush to implement them. You should ask questions, especially if you work in a bigger companies. Usually you have product managers that come with a product requirement, and ask questions, right? Just be curious about the feature. So for example, in this case, questions can be, how is this clock going to be used? Okay, so what's the meaning of it, right? So maybe is the clock going to be used in some sort of competition? If it's that's the case, then the accuracy of the time is very, very, very important, right? Or is just to show on the screen so that you just be able to tell time, but we don't actually have to be that accurate, right? So also over here in the question, it says that you can choose different colors and style it differently. Is this components going to be reusable by other teams? If that's the case, in different features, if we're going to make it reusable, do we want the styles and colors to be consistent across everyone? Or actually for each use case, we can customize it, right? So if we want to offer customizability, then we can think about writing this component. We think about what are the things that can be customized, right? The colors, the styles, or in this case, whether we can customize whether we use a 12-hour or 24-hour display, right? So these are the questions that you can ask, and these are the questions that shows that that demonstrates to the interviewer that you're not just do things that you are being assigned to. You actually think through the questions, because in real life, requirements may not come as very complete. There's a lot of things that you should be asking and should be clarified to understand more about the intent. Sometimes things may say that the things can be described in one way, but actually as you dig, you realize that there are certain plans that in future use cases that was in the idea but wasn't being communicated through the requirements. And I think that by asking that to clarify them shows that you actually think very comprehensively about the questions that you have. Right? Once you clarify with the interviewer, I think the next thing is you can talk through the problem with the interviewer by breaking down the problem. Right? So in this case, how we break down the problem would be, I'll be having a component with this that shows the time, right? So I will have a component called clock that display the time. Right? To display the time, I probably will do a few things. Usually, I'm bad at putting all the ideas in my head, so I will try to type out as I talk, and that also helps to shows all my thought process visually on the screen together with the interviewer, right? So in this case, the first thing is to break down the problem, right? So break down the problem. First thing I would think is I will turn what? I will have a clock component that takes in. I think this is not a comment. Let me write some comment. So break down the problem. I will have a clock component that takes in the time like this, okay? And with the time, the first thing I need to do is to turn the time into string, into this format that we just seen. The time into string. And then after turning them to string, I will iterate through each characters and tries to display the 7-segment display for each digits that we have. Okay, so loop through each character to display 7 segment. Right, so I think this is my step, right? So first is have the components and then turn the time into string. And then with the time in string, I will loop through each character. And for each digit, I will display as a segment. And if the digit is like a colon, then I will just display colon, like display the colon separator. So this is how I would demonstrate how I break down the problems, clarify the questions, and then think ahead and how to plan accordingly. And right now over here, I show the thought process as word itself. You don't have to do that if you find it uncomfortable. But personally, I find it easier that you have the whole plan written down, and then you just implement step by step according to the plan, right? This demonstrates also like high level thinking that encompass the whole processes, and then you just break down the tasks one by one and then implement each of the every step. Right, so because in real life also as an engineer, what you encounter, of course, is not as simple as this digital clocked component. It can be a very complex applications or page, and you will have to show that you have the ability to break down the task, and then shows that you can think what is needed in each different parts of the entire task, and how you can demonstrate that you can deliver plans ahead and then work according to the plan. So having written down the entire plan in words, it has its benefits. It allows us to look at it visually and then look at it one by one to think about anything we have missed so far, right? Especially in an interview, you'll be nervous and you have everything cramped in your head plus the nervousness. You may not be able to think straight and may not have a clear thought process. But over here, we can look at step 1, 2, 3, and then I look at step 1, right? So here we sort of designs the component interface, right? We have time that's passed in as props. But remember, we asked the clarify questions where we ask whether how is this clock being used, whether we can customize the styles, right? So which means here maybe we have note to ourselves, we might want to allow the clock style to be customizable. And then we look at step number 2, turn the time into the string. So here we need to note to ourselves whether we need to we should turn it into a 12-hour display or 24-hour display, right? So that's something that it's mentioned over here. If it's not mentioned, I guess looking at this, we ask ourselves, what do we need to take care of, right? Do we need to take care of AM in the morning or in the afternoons? And since we look at this and look at here, the first note, maybe we want to ask whether the 12 or 24-hour display, should it be a props? Right, so that's something that you can even if you're not writing it down, you can mention that to the interviewer, even that you probably wouldn't have time or wouldn't implement it in your interview, but that can show the interviewer that you have thought it through as you implement it. It's not something like you totally have no idea that this exists, right? So the more information that you give the interviewer, the more that they can judge you as an interviewer, to see how much you can think, how much you know about, and what are the considerations that you have put in as you are writing this implementing this component, right? So next thing is we look through each character, right? So maybe okay, so it seems like there's nothing over here to be we can add on to, but here this step is we are going to create them in the element in the as the implemented in the HTML element, right, where you have one digit as a HTML element. So here over here you might have a few things that I suddenly think about, right? So for example, have we considered like accessibility, right? Or like, is there something that we need to think about? If that's the case, maybe we if this is something that is changing, we might want to let the timing that we're displaying is something that will change, and we want to announce it out to user that cannot see, that user have visual impairments that cannot see the changes in the screen, then maybe that's something that you want to show to the interviewer that you care about it, right? So because here you display it in 7-segment display, right? So as someone that can see, can read, we know that this shape, this is 103554, but you know that if you're going to implement it, it will be just by it's just a bunch of divs with different colors on it, right? Black and white color. But for people who have visual impairment, will probably not able to see this, right? So maybe we want to display that time somewhere in our elements, so that the browser can display that out, that can read out that value to people with visual impairment, right? Which means you should also use some sort of semantic elements that carries a meaning, and also use some sort of ARIA attributes that announce this kind of this information to users that uses the screen reader, right? So these are the things that you can actually think about as you look at, and then you can let the interviewer know that how much things that you have put in when implement this, right? So I mean, this can be a very simple questions, and you can just write through and then work on these solutions and then code it quickly and have it done. But having to show the interviewer that you actually have all these things considered before you implement is very useful and very important. And again, I think it sets you apart from you and the average developers out there, right? So here, let me jot it down in case I can't remember. So accessibility, right? Maybe it's something that we want to show. And probably the interviewer may not have even think of all the points that we mentioned, but if you mention them, right, you are gonna impress your interviewer, right? So here, these are the things that I've thought about. Of course, there may be things that I've missed out, but I think this is good enough. And you know, a lot of times, right, a lot of things that you mentioned over here, not all of them have to be implemented during the interview. It depends on how fast you can implement them, right? If you can implement all of them, it's the best. But even if you can't implement them, you can tell the interviewer that you've considered everything, and then maybe some of the things you can implement it right now to show them, but some of the things may take longer time, and you probably not implement it for now, and you implement something that they want to see, that at least you get something that is working, and then you can ask them that whether you still have time and you can work on it to polish it up by fulfilling all the requirements that you have thought out. I mean, interviewers are just human, are just a normal person. You can talk to them, you can discuss with them, and show them all you have and what you can do. I think this also demonstrates the ability to communicate to people well, to communicate to stakeholder well. Because sometimes also, and in real world, right, you may not have enough time to implement the whole thing by the given time frame. So you can negotiate with the stakeholders to figure out what are the most important things that they're looking for, and then get those done first, and we can improve it in a later phase, right? So all these things is a demonstration of a good engineer. and you shouldn't act it out, but these are the things that you can think of, and here are the things that I've showed you so that you can be aware of them and apply them through all your interviews and also at work as an engineer, right? So now we have this whole thing, and now let's implement it. I think we have talked too much, and we it's time that we start implementing it. Right, so here we have our clock. We mentioned that we're going to pass the time in, right? So here, firstly is we're going to set, we're going to have the time as date.now for now, right? And here we're going to pass the time in like this as prompts, and here we're going to use the time as a prompts to display it over here like this. Good thing that over here in Great Frontend, you can see the effect of what you have just written down live on the screen on the right. But if you are developing in an environment that you can't do that, if it's possible, if it's allowed by the interviewer, I think you should always keep looking at the result itself, and then make sure that at every step you are working towards the goal that you are aiming for, so that you won't finish everything, coding everything, and then when you run the code and realize that it breaks and you have no idea where you should go back to. But of course, if you're able to find out where you went wrong, that I think that's also demonstrates the ability to break down the problems and debug. But also now we can also show our ability to, constantly check where we are at. We have different milestones we want to do, right? We have the first milestone, and we check that we have passed the first milestone. Of course, we're not fully complete. We want to update our time, and in our case, we can use a on mount to set up interval, right? And if you are, if you can think as you type like me, which of course comes from a lot of practice, you can also explain that why you use on mount, what is on mount for. And then you can also tell the interview that you want to set an interval so that keep updating the time at a fixed interval. So I'm gonna have time equals date now like this to update the time on every interval, and we're gonna use a probably 100 milliseconds, which is 1/10 of a second to update this interval. And okay, so why, right? Then I will explain, because I think that of course it depends on the use case, right? So how accurate do we how accurate do we need, right? So if we want to be very accurate, then we need to update it as frequent as possible, but of course not too frequent, because we will be because the clock just shows 2 seconds, so it's too frequent that it's also useless. But also because we might be starting at any time within a second, so we want to make sure that we able to, as the seconds goes to the next second, we want to be able to show immediately. But if we have intervals of every second, then we probably are not showing the seconds at the right time. We will see at every second you update, but you probably at the end of that second before you show that number. So you probably have a delay or lag of less than 1 second, like it's something like 500 milliseconds or something like that. But you're not very accurate. So it depends on your use cases, right? So here we set 100 milliseconds. So this is how we set out the interval. And of course, the most important thing is we need to clear the interval, right? As we set an interval. So so we've shown that we have good practices that we clean up. Of course, you don't have to say that to the interviewer, but you can type that out, and you can explain that we want to clean up so that we don't have memory leaks, right? So that's one thing you can mention. So now we have the time. The next thing we're gonna go at our, right? So this is done. So next thing we're gonna do is step 2. We're gonna turn the time into string. So we're gonna implement a function, right? So turn time to string. Okay, and then this gives us a time, and then we're gonna implement the function to return the time to string. A lot of times, sometimes when I write this, this is like the structure of the code. I would also go forward before, like have this, sometimes I will implement ahead of time to draft out all the structures before implementing each of the functions. So here I might be going to say like, okay, I have something like a time equals, like string, time string equals to time to string with the time. And then here I would loop through time string as character. And then for each character, I would, display it out like this, right? So this is somewhat like 2 and 3 to show that, what the function that we're going to implement will be used on how we want to use this function within our component, right? So even before we implement the function itself, right? So we imagine this will return us a string like this, and then we can use it like this in each loop, which is somewhat like our step 3. Now we step back, can I implement this turn the time, which is number, into a string. So then I will implement it, like say get the date object based on the time, and then we get hour, date that get hours, minute, second, and then return the hour, minute, second. Okay, so it looks like this. And then of course, if it's 1 digit, we don't really have a we want to display like 0 1 instead of just 1, so we need to pad that string. Then we're going to implement a function called pad that takes in a number, pad number, right? And here is where we're going to implement it. And as I mentioned this, I'm going to show that, okay, I'm going to use it this way, where I'll pad number for each of the hour, minute, and second, right? And then, so you know that what I'm going to implement, how I'm going to use it, and now I'm going to go to implement it, right? So this one, of course, I'm going to turn the number into string. So this is the number. And one thing that you have to take care of is also one small details that you should take care of is the way you define variables, right? So you should have some sort of convention on how you can name your variables. I know naming is hard, but showing that you care about name instead of having variables that is just like s or something like that, instead of having like number string, number in string, or maybe number str, which maybe you have the convention that this tells you what the variable is about, and then also you have suffix about the data type of the variable. I think this will be helpful in demonstrating to the interviewer that you care about naming variables because they are actually important, right? You should demonstrate as much as possible of how you will be contributing at work when you are hired by them, right? So at work, you probably should not name a variable with just one character. And why would you want to do that in an interview, right? Because of time? No, I don't think so. You should demonstrate that full well to the interviewer that you care about it, and you care about it, and you don't care about where you are. You care about it in your code, and you don't care about at what circumstances you are writing your code, right? Whether it's interviewing or at real job, you care about it, and you will take care of it in all circumstances, right? So here I have number string, and of course I'm gonna I will check that number string dot length. If it's like just 1, then I'll return like 0 plus the number string. Else I'm going to return number string, so it should be 2 digits. So now it looks like this. Okay, so we have the timer going on, right? It looks nice now. Now it's just that for each character we need to display them in a 7-segment display, right? So which means we have to start So this part is done. Of course, we have not done this yet, so we can say that if we want to do, we can explain roughly how we're going to do it, but not necessarily do it right now, right? Say, for example, in the hours, we can check if it's greater than 12, but we want a 12-hour display, then we're going to minus 12 from it, right? So you can explain, if you can type fast, of course, you can just type it out, but if you can't type fast, you can explain how you're going to do, and if it makes sense, if you ask them if it makes sense, you don't have to write it out, right? So they understand you. If you're gonna have more time, more than what the interview time allotted you to be, you can do it, right? So now next we move to the step 3, which is to loop through each character and then try to display this 7-segment display. Right. So first thing is we're gonna have some sort of div to wrap this whole thing up, and we're gonna have like some sort of style element over here to define our styles. So for each of the character, we can differentiate whether it's a colon or a number, and then colon we can display 2 circles, but if it's a number, then we're gonna display a 7-segment digit display, right? So if a character is a colon, then we have to take care of it separately. Okay, I'm gonna say class separator, and else we will have our 7-segment display, right? So this is the 7-segment, or we're gonna call it digit. Okay, and for digit now, and in this step, yeah, I think you can discuss it earlier on or right now also, right? Which is how you're actually gonna handle this 7-segment display, right? We probably will have a function that tells us like which of these segments are gonna be displayed and which is not, right? And then we will also explain how we're gonna create the div element needed. In this case, I'm going to create 2 div elements, one on top, one at the bottom. And basically, I'm going to use the border up, down, left, right, the border of the div element to set the different color on the border element, whether it's black or white, to display this 7 segments. So we have 2 div elements, and then so in this case, like for example, the character 5, the top element has the border right to be black color, and then top, left, and bottom is white color, and the bottom div element has the bottom border left to be black, and then top, right, and bottom is white color, right? You can see that this is how I think to implement this one, and see whether they are okay with it. And you can also explain that if you have more time, like you want to implement exactly like the design, because I think attention to detail, like in the design, if you do a border, I don't think you can create something that looks like this, right? With like a very nice curve and then also like lines in between every segment, right? So maybe you can also share that is that enough to implement this for the given time, or in actual scenario, you probably will have the same logic to control the borders, but you would use a different way to implement it in the HTML, like using some SVG and then change the color of the different SVG elements, right? For each of these segments would be one SVG polygon, and then you change the color of each of the SVG polygon based on whether it's black or white color, right? But the logic of choosing which polygon or which border should be the same, right? So can you simplify this problem, but still have that the core logic to be there? And most likely than not, at least for this question, I feel that they want to test how you write it and also implement that logic for 7-segment display. So I think they are okay with you have a simplified HTML elements to implement this, right? So in that case, so these are the things that you can talk through and think through your thought process, like I just demonstrate to you. And I think these are the things that that influences that informs the interviewer how much you have put in again, I think I've stressed this enough. It demonstrates how much you have put into consideration when you implement this design. It's not about just writing down the code, right? I mean, with ChatGPT, I can generate the code with, or I can just go Stack Overflow and search for an answer and paste it in, right? But whether that answer itself is what we want in this specific circumstances, it depends on what is the circumstances and what are the considerations, what are the thought process that's put in there, right? And also demonstrates you having the ability to change the implementation or change things based on based on circumstances. As the requirement changes, you show them the ability that you have thought through and know how to change the code based on different circumstances. That's what they are looking for. Okay. And that's what marks a great engineer than a normal average engineer out there. So here we have the class digit, and now we're gonna create. As we mentioned, a way we think about, we have the top and the bottom. Okay, I'm gonna put class like this one. So this is roughly how we're gonna implement it. Okay, in the HTML structure. And then we have mentioned that what each of this is for, right? So let's start with something. Let's have a class for this one. Let's start with, I don't know, something simpler, right? But we have to go. So again, depends on how you think. You can start from top to bottom, right? So for example, the container, we're gonna have a border. Like in this example, the border looks like it's like 4 pixels, solid gray, and then background is black, and then maybe we have some sort of display inline flex. And then for each of this character, for example, the separator, we have maybe something like a padding, 10. I think each of this separates with each other, maybe 5 pixel, I guess. So maybe we can have a class like character like this, while every character have a margin 15 pixels and 2 pixels, 15 from the top and bottom, and 5 pixels left and right. So this is what we get on the left side on the screen. And then for separator, actually we will probably need 2 circles. So we're gonna use 2 div to demonstrate that. So the dot itself have probably 5 pixel background color gray, and the separator can use a display flex that we have flex direction column, and then align items space around, justify content. Okay, this demonstrates how bad I am in reflex, but let's see what we need over here. Separator, space around, right? I think. Yeah, I think what we need is a height to be maybe 200 pixel. Okay, I think that's too big. 550. Still too big. Maybe 100. Okay, so this is the separator separating. So maybe this one we can have some slightly bigger. Looks like this. Okay. To make it round, we can have border radius 50%. This is rounded radius, right? If you can roughly explain, but I mean, it's self-explanatory as you type, but you can also explain if you have the brain power to tell that why you decided to use flex for this layout, right? And then we have our character digits, right? So digit, we will need to we'll have to set, okay, so height 100 pixel, width 80 pixel. I'm not sure, is it too big? Maybe 50 pixel for now first. And then border 10 pixels solid white, right? So this is the for digit. Okay, of course we're gonna put the border at the top and bottom. So here maybe we have another digit digit part, right? This is the part. This again, we're gonna use display flex direction column, and then this is the height is 50%, width is 100%, box sizing is border box. Why? Because we want the width to include the border itself. So as you type, you can explain why you choose, what do you choose as you type. So you see that this because of two box, the top, the center border looks very thick. Maybe we can change it by saying that for the top one, a border bottom to be 5 pixel, like half of it. 5 for the bottom width, and then for the bottom, the border top width to be 5 pixel as well. So each have equivalent width, right? I think the height maybe can be shorter a bit, like 80 pixel. Same goes with the separator. This looks more even. Okay, so now so separator has a, okay, we change the color to white, so every color is the same. Now comes with the logic, right? To loop through character, right? This we have already done, but if digit, we display separate segment, which is correct, but we have to decide which border to show and hide, right? So now next thing is to display how you can think about what is the how you're gonna design what, like we probably will definitely have a function that says that digit to 7 segment, right? So this is the digit, right? And you're gonna use some sort of switch case to decide, like for example, if it's 0, what to do, right? What you return. And again, after I have the rough structure that say I'm gonna implement this function, I'm gonna instead of explaining how it will look like, I would also show that, I mean, on top of explaining how it's gonna look like, I think the way of explaining how it's gonna be used is to show how you're gonna use it, right? So here, for example, in our each loop, I will come here and say that maybe I'll define a variable here, like say 7 segment equals to digit to 7 segment with the character. And I will say that, okay, this probably is maybe it's an array, right? Tell me which border to be turned on and off, and then I'll be use it to determine like which border to be turned on and off, right? So I can demonstrate like what do you mean by array? Then I can explain, like say draw some sort of graph. So for example, I'm gonna draw something. Might be a bit tedious, but bear with me. So I have something like a 7 segment like this. right? Next. Right, so this is the seven segment display. So each of this border probably will have some sort of names to it, or we can give like some ID or some number to it. So here I'm gonna call this like 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 6, this is 7. Okay, let me draw it. I mean, nicer if you have, but I think for interview you don't have time and doesn't really judge you based on how nice you draw. But you can definitely see this looks much better. But yeah, when you're nervous, I don't think you have time to spend so much time of it. But I think it sort of tells the interviewer your character, but you don't have to act for that, right? So just be yourself, right? So here I say that I have like different IDs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 based on the segments, and then for 0 case I'll return an array, like 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. I'll return an array that tells me that which of this segment to be turned on, right? And which, so it's be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, right? So, and this array, how I'm gonna use it is that I will come here, then I will probably conditionally set a class like class top equals to the 7 segment includes the top, right? So for the top, to include the top is whether I have 1, left is includes 2, right is when it includes 3. So you see that how useful is this when you draw it out, right? Although like it feels like pointless to do it, but once you draw it out, it's so much easier for you and the interviewer to know that what you mean and what they are for, and also it's much easier for you to check your implementation and not do something that because of nervous you might, a lot of times because of nervous you might accidentally do something wrong, and this is much easier to debug to see where you're going wrong, and everyone has a clear idea of what this refers to. So of course now we have to implement the whole thing, but let's assume that right now we're just calling it with 0. Then whether it works, I mean, we have defined the I think this class and this class might be hold on, let me like this. No, I think this class have to be, I'm gonna call upper and lower. Okay, so this class and this class, top left, right, bottom, I think let's implement them. Right, so if we have our border, I think our border should be black in color by default. And if tops is correct, let's see, like this, then our border top color should be white. This is bottom left color. This is bottom right color. And this is bottom color. Right? Once you do this, you see that we have a 0, which is correct, right? And then of course you show that I mean we can break the task down to simple case like in this, and then you demonstrate that it works. And then I guess now we focus on implement this function, right? So you can have some sort of basic case first to make sure that it works as how you design this function to be, show that it works as expected, and then you can check, and at least you can come back later on. You can fix this right now if it doesn't work as you expected, instead of having to implement the whole thing and then come back and realize that it doesn't work, and you have to figure out which part of things that doesn't work well. Right, so here I'm gonna change this back to car, right, which is the character, and of course for each of the case, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we have to implement the array. Oops. Right, so here for 1 we need 3 and 6. For 2 we are gonna have a 1, 3, 4, 5, 7. For 3 it's 1, 3, 4, 6 and 7. For 4 it's 2, 3, 4, 6. Right, for 5 is 1, 2, 4, 6, 7. For 6 is similar to 5, but we have 5. And for 7 is we have 1, 3, 6. For 8 we have everything, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And for 9 we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay, let's refresh this, and I think we have all characters implemented and looks working right now, right? It updates itself every second, and it's displaying time as sort of what we expected. And then now we have implemented everything. But of course, now we have mentioned some of those things, right? Allow style to be customizable, accessibilities and stuff. And we can look at our time and then see, okay, it's working now. Do we have more time? Should I show you like what I would think about implementing the accessibility of it? And if you do it fast enough, of course, you have more time. You can work on it. But of course, even if you have no time, you can explain how you're going to implement it, right? So for example, accessibility, I think that for this case, instead of having a div of divs, I'm going to use a time element instead. Okay, a time element has this attribute called datetime, where it can be used by the browser to display the to show, like, this is like a semantic element that allows the browser to know the date and time. And here I'm going to use the time string, right? And here the screen reader may be able to read this date time from the screen to user with visual impairment, right? I think that would work. I have not personally tried it, but I think that's one thing that you can do. And maybe there's some sort of area that you can actually do the announcement as well. And if you know them, you can say, but if you don't know them exactly the name of it, you can tell that you know that there's some sort of attributes that's available, or some sort of elements that can do that. That shows that you know it, because in most of the case, you're not tasked to memorize everything, right? You're tasked about knowledge where you know. I mean, once you mention that, you know that what are the keywords, how you're gonna search for it when you need it, right? And I think that's more important to know what's out there than memorizing everything out there that's available, right? So this is one way that you can do. And then about the customizable styles, then you can mention that instead of hard coding the colors over here, you can use CSS custom variables. So we don't have to customize everything, but we can show that, say for example, the digit display is using white right now, right? And I think this is something that we can be customized by. It can be used to customize from the user. So we can actually have some sort of color, like um, digit color as a CSS variables and defaults to white, like this one. So you can say that you can use it like over here. And then this, you can come over here and customize it. So say digit color, if you want it to be red, then you can change it by using custom variables, CSS custom variables on the component itself, right? So then you can change all the colors, right? So you can show that you can, this is how you would be exposing, allowing people to change the custom variables out there in your component, right? So these are the things that you can discuss and explore with your interviewer and show that your ability of putting extra considerations in your thought process and implementing this whole component, right? So I hope that walking through this whole thing shows you my thought processes, and hope that all the different tips and tricks that I have mentioned so far will be helpful for you in your interview, right? So be sure to understand the full interview processes, and then practice and practice. And once you get an interview offer, then be sure to set a study plan to practice enough for your interview. So good luck with your interview. If you find this useful and helpful, please do give me a huge thumbs up and share it with your friends. And I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye.